welcome to episode 5 of the second season of the Realise Mindfulness podcast, where we explore the topic of mindful compassion. I can't believe we're at the halfway point of this season already. So during the episode, we'll have a chance to pause and reflect on some of our key learnings so far as we explore today's theme, which is embodying compassion. As usual, we'll share some of the ideas underpinning the Mindfulness Based Compassionate Living course, and I'll offer a short on-the-go practice, which today is a breathing space with a flavour of compassion. As always, we'll end with a longer guided meditation, which supports today's theme as we share together an embodying compassion practice. A short disclaimer at this point. The Mindfulness Based Compassionate Living course was developed as a support to deepening mindfulness practice, and it assumes that you've already spent some time building mindful foundations. So if you're new to mindfulness, you may find it helpful to start by listening to season 1 of the podcast. And if you're ready to explore mindful compassion, let me acknowledge that the MBCL course is rich and deep, and that this podcast is in no way a replacement for attending an 8-week course. Rather, it can work as an introduction, a companion, or a refresher for the course. And if you're interested in finding out more, I've included some helpful links in the show notes. So, without further ado, let's continue with today's theme of embodying compassion. If you've been listening for a while, you'll appreciate that the first few weeks of the Mindfulness Based Compassionate Living course are packed with background information and practices which lay the foundations for compassionate living. Today we have the opportunity to pause, reflect, and consolidate some of the themes, ideas and practices that we've shared so far, much as we do in week 4 of the MBCL course. In this episode, we consider how we can cultivate the skills, attitudes and atmosphere for compassion to flourish. We also discuss the role of our inner helper. And in our longer meditation, which I'll share at the end of the episode, we practice embodying compassion. Our shorter on-the-go meditation today is a breathing space with compassion. A practice that you can do anytime, anywhere in moments of difficulty or challenge. You may have noticed that the MBCL course invites us to use guided imagery as one of the paths to developing compassion. We've explored why and how imagery can be so effective in previous episodes, and let me offer a quick recap here. Our brain doesn't process the difference between real and imagined events. You might like to give this a try with me right now. Perhaps imagining that you're at a theme park queuing for the roller coaster. As you wait your turn, you watch the excited faces and listen to the chatter around you. Maybe noticing the sense of anticipation showing up in your body. And eventually your car arrives and you climb in, feeling the safety harness come down around your shoulders. The car begins to chug along the track, slowly climbing higher and higher. As you look down, you can see the whole of the theme park stretching below you. You seem so high. As you approach the summit of the track, you watch the cars in front of you disappear over the edge and hear the excitement of the riders. Okay, so let's press pause here and just notice what's going on in your body. What sensations are present? What thoughts and emotions? Now, depending on whether you enjoy roller coasters or not, you're maybe experiencing a raft of different reactions. Personally, I hate roller coasters. Even as I'm sharing this, I notice a build-up of butterflies in my tummy, a feeling of nauseous anxiety. However, if my two sons were listening, they'd both be eager with anticipation, waiting for the thrill of the drop. That's the power of our imagination. There are many scientific studies to back this up. For instance, in a famous and oft-replicated study, one group were asked to perform hand and arm exercises. One group were asked to simply imagine performing the same exercises, whilst a control group did neither. Muscle tone was measured at the start and the end of the experiment period. And fascinatingly, both those performing the actual exercises and those imagining them had both gained muscle tone at the end of the period. This goes to prove that our imagination and mental imagery can be used to powerful effect, and backs up the teaching story from last episode that it can serve us well to pay attention to which wolf we're feeding. Sometimes participants can be a bit blocked when invited to join in the imagery practices during the course. For example, the inner critic may pipe up and tell us that we're not that imaginative. But imagination's a skill we all have. Think about an event you've been recently looking forward to. I'm willing to bet you spent some time in your head imagining how it would be, who would be there, what you'd be doing, how you'd be feeling, how much fun it would be. Maybe even picturing the outfit you'd be wearing, and perhaps maybe some compliments that you might receive. I'm sure, like me, you've also spent time imagining an event that you were dreading, maybe giving a presentation or attending a challenging meeting. I recently had to visit our local commune or town hall offices to get some paperwork authorised, and I was creating all sorts of stories in my head about how difficult it was going to be. Maybe, like me, you sometimes spend time imagining everything that could go wrong, how frustrated or embarrassed we might feel, and we can become quite stressed as a result of our imaginings. I'm pleased to report that my visit to the town hall was fine, and I collected the necessary paperwork with no drama. I was actually able to use my compassion practice and a breathing space with compassion as I was queuing to be seen, and this helped to calm and ground me. However, afterwards I reflected that I could have saved myself some anxiety by focusing on a positive outcome rather than catastrophising. In the words of the Stoic philosopher Seneca, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. So let's pause now and share a short on-the-go practice that can be particularly helpful in times of stress or difficulty or anxiety. It's the breathing space with compassion meditation that I just mentioned. This practice is a slight twist on the 3-step breathing space with kindness we shared last week, and today we really add an extra scoop of compassion to help make the practice a compassionate first response to times of difficulty or challenge. So making any adjustments to your posture that would be helpful to support you in opening to mindful awareness. Noticing what's here now, and choosing whether to do this breathing space while you're sitting, standing, or lying down, and knowing that in everyday life you can vary the duration depending on the situation you're in. As with all 3-step breathing spaces, we distinguish 3 separate phases. So beginning with mindful presence and open, kind awareness, simply acknowledging everything that shows up in the field of awareness right now, including anything that feels painful or difficult. So, for instance, if tension in the body shows up, then simply noticing and maybe naming, tension in the jaw, tightness in the shoulders, clenching in the stomach, and seeing if it's possible to bring a gentle attitude of softening to any areas of holding or tension in the body. And noticing what emotions are here, the emotional landscape right now. And if anything painful shows up, then seeing if you can introduce an attitude of gently soothing anything that's more tender. And checking in with the thoughtscape. And if you notice thoughts of criticism, worry, planning, then maybe just gently noting, worry, worry, inner critic, holding whatever's present in a cradle of kindness and embodying an attitude of softening to what's here in our body, soothing our emotional landscape and allowing thoughts to be present. And then in step 2, shifting awareness either to a chosen anchor, perhaps a sense of body on chair or feet on floor, or maybe shifting attention to the breath and inviting a soothing breathing rhythm to naturally emerge as you follow the flow of the breath all the way in and all the way out. Letting the breath flow freely, allowing the body to soften, gravitating towards the ground that supports us. And then with step 3, expanding awareness to take in a sense of the whole body, from the crown of the head right down to the soles of the feet. And from this sense of wider awareness, opening to what could be a compassionate wish for yourself in this moment. And if a wish presents itself, then gently offering yourself the wish on the flow of the breath. And if no wish shows up, then maybe something such as, may I feel calm, may I feel safe, may I receive comfort in this time of difficulty. Or maybe, may I accept what I cannot change. And sometimes a paradoxical wish like, may I allow myself to fully feel this tiredness, this sadness. Sometimes such a wish can be very compassionate. In this way, allowing space for what's here. And sometimes the 3 phrases of the self-compassion mantra may fit well, acknowledging a moment of difficulty, the humanness of that, and wishing ourselves well. So allowing your kind wish to flow once more on the breath or independently of the breath. So, as our practice draws to a close, maybe noticing what's here now, what's present as a result of taking a short breathing space. And remembering we're not trying to feel any particular way, rather being kind and compassionate to whatever's present for us. So we've explored how if we let our imagination run on autopilot, not being aware of its antics, it can work for us or against us. And in compassion training, we intentionally invite our imagination to work for us, consciously focusing on building the skills and attributes associated with compassion. Again, we can encounter resistance here. Perhaps our inner critic tells us this is silly, we're wasting our time, or we're simply not a compassionate person. Who are we trying to kid? Here we can put mindful compassion into practice by simply noticing thoughts as present, without having to get carried away by their propaganda. In fact, research has shown that a daily practice of around 5 minutes for a couple of weeks, spent imagining our best possible self, has beneficial effects on our optimism, which is also known to contribute to our physical and psychological well-being. The Embodying Compassion practice that we share at the end of the episode invites us to do just that, imagining our compassionate self. We use our imagination in this way to help us cultivate certain ways of being. Cultivation can refer to trying to develop a particular skill or way of being, as well as being used as an agricultural term, for example, cultivating crops. I'm no gardener, but a few years ago we had to reseed the feed that my horses had spent the winter in, as it had turned into a bit of a muddy mess. I learnt the following things about cultivation in the process. First, we have to prepare the ground, creating a conducive atmosphere for seeds to flourish. Then, once the seeds have been planted, we need to nurture them. Sometimes nature provides all that's needed in terms of sun and rain. But the year we reseeded the field, it was very hot. It was a spring with no rain, and we had to pay special attention and water the fledgling seeds every day to allow them to flourish. This took patience and planning, and sometimes it felt like hard work for very little reward as I impatiently watched the muddy ground. So I had to accept that the seeds grew in their own time. No matter how fast I wanted the grass to grow, I had to trust that it would come to fruition in its own time. Likewise, we cannot flourish when we're in drive mode, pushing for an outcome. Neither can we flourish when threat mode is in operation, when we're fearful or protecting ourselves. Rather, compassion needs an atmosphere of warmth, kindness, calmness and playfulness. And we may need to nurture and support our own compassion, practicing patiently, regularly and diligently, and letting go of the need to see immediate results. Paul Gilbert, creator of compassion-focused therapy and co-author of the book Mindful Compassion, offers a model of the circles of compassion, outlining the atmosphere, attributes and skills that we need to pay attention to as we cultivate compassion. In MBCL, we like to talk about the lotus of compassion. The lotus flower is widely recognised as a symbol of compassion, and whilst it may be deeply rooted in the mud, its blossoms are appreciated for both their beauty and their fragrance. In fact, the deeper the mud, the more beautiful the bloom. As the saying goes, no mud, no lotus. In the same way, when we're courageous enough to encounter the muddier areas of our own lives, the suffering and the areas of challenge, with an attitude of kindness, then compassion can blossom. To enable this flourishing, we need to create conditions of kindness, warmth, calm and playfulness. These are like the big green leaves of the lotus flower, allowing it to float elegantly on the lily pond. To enable our blossom to unfurl, we need to nurture the attributes of compassion, the attributes that enable us to be alive to the suffering of both ourselves and of others. These include a motivation to care for the well-being of ourselves and others, and a sensitivity to attune to our own needs and the needs of those around us. We also need sympathy. That's the ability to feel and to resonate with other people's joy and sadness. And empathy, the ability to feel into and to understand the joy and suffering of others, and to develop compassionate understanding of their motives and needs, even when actions may be misguided or harmful. Another attribute we need to develop is courage and distress tolerance. One of the potential blocks to compassion we've talked about is a concern that we may become overwhelmed and develop what's sometimes referred to as compassion fatigue. In fact, the well-known monk and meditation teacher Matthieu Ricard suggests that compassion fatigue is actually a misnomer, and we may better speak of empathy fatigue. His suggestions backed up by neuroscience, suggesting that when we practice true compassion, it supports our resilience and well-being, rather than making us feel tired. The final quality we need to develop is wisdom, an open mind for the complexities of life, and developing the discernment to recognise the difference between helpful and harmful actions. Alongside these compassionate attributes, we can cultivate and develop compassionate skills. These skills are like the inner petals of the lotus flower. If our compassionate attributes are like the inside petals of the lotus flower, the skills are like the outside petals. And these skills are what enable us to take compassionate action to alleviate suffering. And thankfully, they're the skills of mindful awareness that we've been developing throughout seasons 1 and 2 of the podcast. Mindfulness helps us to be aware of where we rest our attention. As the saying suggests, energy flows where attention goes. And if we align our attention to the qualities of compassion, these are the qualities that will grow. In this way, we can choose to feed the wolf of love, kindness, compassion, and hope. We can also develop the skill of sensory exploration and learn to intentionally overcome our human negativity bias by savouring that which offers calm, pleasure, and nourishment. In the same way, we can cultivate wholesome emotions like joy, gratitude, and forgiveness. We'll explore this more in future episodes. We can also gently and kindly hold our more tender emotions, mindfully inviting our soothing system on board, for example, by practicing a breathing space with compassion, or simply coming to a soothing breathing rhythm. Mindfulness also helps us relate to our thoughts and emotions with a reasoning mind state, recognizing the ebb and flow of thoughts we can recognise that, like the clouds in the sky, thoughts come and go. And just like clouds, their content changes from day to day, sometimes light and fluffy, and sometimes dark and menacing. Mindful reasoning helps us to recognise that it's all just the weather passing through. An example of compassionate reasoning could be, if you can change it, then why worry? And if you can't change it, then why worry? We've already explored the benefits of working with imagery, and this is a skill we develop to good effect in the Mindfulness Based Compassionate Living programme. Practices like the safe place, the compassionate companion, and today's practice, embodying compassion, all help us to utilise imagery for both our own well-being and that of others. Another crucial skill area to develop is that of compassionate behaviour, speaking and acting with kindness. In fact, the golden rule of treating others as you wish to be treated yourself is fundamental to many of the world's wisdom traditions. As we develop the skills of mindful compassion, we often find our actions becoming more aligned to our positive intentions. The final idea I want to share today is that of cultivating our inner helper. As we explored in the last episode, many of us have a harsh inner critic who drives us on and lets us know every time we make a mistake. We've talked about how it can help to understand the positive intentions behind our inner critic and to maybe befriend them in a playful way, giving them a funny nickname or a character. For instance, I like to call my inner voice of doom and gloom Eeyore. Picturing the gentle but ever gloomy character from Winnie the Pooh somehow lightens the way I relate to this part of me. When we step into an objective, mindful awareness, we often have a good sense of when our inner critic is in the driving seat. For instance, we may notice we're leaning towards negativity, only noticing our failures and shortcomings, or perhaps focusing on those of others. Our inner critic's often pessimistic about failure and scathing of mistakes, evoking feelings of shame and humiliation. We're also likely to be feeling irritable and anxious, maybe even avoiding contact with others around us when our inner critic's in control. Our inner critic's a bit like a bullying boss, always expecting more and never appreciating our hard work and good efforts. Thankfully, there is another option. We can invite our inner helper to step into the driving seat. They're more like a kind and patient teacher who help us to enjoy the learning process. Our inner helper's open to experience, and it operates from a growth mindset, noticing what went well and what's possible for the future. Our inner helper's forgiving of past mistakes and asks what we can learn rather than what went wrong, helping us to take responsibility and, if need be, to heal relationships by using healthy guilt to think about the consequences of our actions and how we can make amends, rather than stepping into unhelpful shame and blame. When we relate to ourselves with the attitude of an inner helper, we speak to ourselves in a kind tone of voice, the tone of voice we'd use to a small child or a dear friend who was struggling. In a moment, we'll put all this into practice with an embodying compassion practice. But before we do, let's share a quick recap of what we've covered today. We've looked at the power of our imagination and how mindful imagery can help us cultivate compassion. We've shared a breathing space with compassion meditation, which we can use as an on-the-go practice in times of difficulty or challenge. And by exploring the Lotus of Compassion, we've begun to identify the environment, the attributes and the skills we need to grow in order to embody compassion. And we've explored how to distinguish whether our inner critic or our inner helper is in the driving seat. So let's end our session with a guided imagery meditation that supports us to cultivate the skills and attitude of a compassionate inner helper. So, I invite you to find a space where you won't be disturbed for the next 15 minutes or so, and choose a comfortable posture as we settle down to share our practice. This is an embodying compassion practice. So, choosing a comfortable position for our practice, maybe either sitting or lying down, and beginning with steps 1 and 2 of the breathing space with kindness. So first of all, inviting mindful awareness to be present, exploring what sensations are present in the body right now. And what's here in the emotional landscape. And how about thoughts? And opening to an attitude of softening any areas of tension or holding in the body. Soothing any thoughts which may be causing anxiety or suffering. And allowing thoughts to be here. No need to grasp onto them or to push them away. Just noticing what's here now. And then shifting to step 2 of the breathing space with kindness as we invite a soothing breathing rhythm. Gently maybe slowing and deepening the breath. Allowing the breath to find its own natural soothing rhythm as you follow the flow of the in-breath all the way in, until in-breath naturally turns to out-breath. Following the flow of the breath all the way out, until out-breath naturally turns to in-breath. In this way, gently being rocked on the rhythm of your own breath. And from here you're invited to practice with your imagination in a playful way. First, inviting a place of safeness to come up in whatever way that presents itself today. Encouraging all the senses to participate. So, imagining what you can see, hear and smell. What sensations are present in this safe place? And really imagining that you're the receiver of kindness from this safe place. A sense of warmth, comfort and safeness emanates all around you. You feel welcomed and accepted just as you are. And then maybe from this safe place, or perhaps independent from it, imagining a compassionate companion emerging in whatever form they may appear today. And envisioning being the receiver of kindness from this being, knowing that you're accepted just the way you are, and receiving the well wishes that they send your way. Knowing that this being embodies all the qualities of kindness. They're warm and receptive, kind and wise, accepting of you just the way you are. Enjoying spending time in their presence. And now an invitation to imagine that you too embody all these qualities of compassion. So allowing all the qualities that you imagined in your compassionate companion to also be present in yourself. And of course, this is a practice, so there's no need to achieve any particular results. Just letting your imagination playfully create a compassionate version of yourself. Mindfully exploring with curiosity what happens. So imagining that you're deeply sensitive to the needs of others and to the needs of yourself. And you're committed to relieving suffering and promoting happiness. You have so much empathy, feeling into the experiences of others as they arrive, understanding what goes on inside hearts and minds. And accompanying this, you have the courage to face what's difficult, to tolerate suffering and be present with it as long as it needs. You embody a wisdom, a non-judgmental attitude, and having learned from the lessons of life, you know when and how to respond in words and in deeds. You're patient, allowing space for not knowing and for beginner's mind, opening yourself up to new possibilities. Your whole being is permeated by a warmth, a kindness, a calmness, and a playfulness. And as you imagine embodying compassion, also exploring what effects it has on you. Noticing what's present in your body right now. How about your posture? Its temperature? Sensations around the face and facial muscles, in the neck and shoulders, the chest region, and right down in the belly, your arms and hands, and sensations through the bottom half of the body and your legs and feet. And how does embodying compassion in this way affect your mind state and your mood state? and allowing all experiences to be part of the practice, whether pleasant or challenging. They can be mindfully acknowledged, and also allowing space for any reactivity. Thoughts like, I can't do this, or this is stupid, or maybe feelings of disappointment or frustration. As best you can, mindfully holding these in kind awareness too. This in itself is already embodying compassion. And the more you practice being the compassionate version of yourself, the more familiar it becomes. So be gentle and patient with yourself. Mindfully acknowledging whatever arises, and returning again and again to the imagery and practice of embodying compassion. Maybe at times it feels most appropriate to embody the tender sides of compassion. And maybe at times the strong and powerful elements of compassion are called for. Embodying compassion in all its complexities. And you can also imagine embodying and radiating compassion when you look at something painful in yourself or something painful in the world around you, like the suffering of another. Imagining compassion flowing from you to where it's needed. And as our practice draws to a close, coming back to a sense of the body, resting on the surfaces that are supporting you right now. And knowing that this is a practice you can return to at any time. And for now, ending the practice in your own time. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. It's my heartfelt wish that this podcast, in its own small way, contributes to the spread of mindfulness and compassion in our world. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and follow it. And if you have friends who may be interested, please share it with them too. And if you'd like to find out more about me and my work, including the Mindfulness Based Compassionate Living group course and one-to-one coaching, you can do so at my website, www.realisemindfulness.com. Please do keep listening, and if you'd like to keep in touch, it would be wonderful to hear from you. So, until next time, wishing you ease and kindness in the flow of life.